Hello, I'm Assemblyman Dennis Gabryszak, and welcome to Assembly Update. Today I am joined in studio with my guest, Heather Briccetti, who is President and CEO of the Business Council. Heather joined the Business Council back in 2007 as Vice President of Government Affairs and became President of the Business Council this past January. Heather, thanks for coming on the show and welcome.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I know we've had the opportunity the last year or so to meet a couple times and talk about some of the issues that are important to you and to your group, but just so the viewers have a better understanding, we just talk a little bit about what the Business Council is and who you represent.
Sure. We're the largest statewide employers association, so we represent jobs, basically. We represent all the, not all, but about 3,000 private sector employers in the state of New York, large and small, from GE and Verizon down to local smaller companies who are members who might buy life or dental insurance or disability insurance from us. So from one employee up to 50,000 employees, that's our membership.
And I know you're very active, a very active organization in Albany. On behalf of all the members that you have, I know you push specific legislation, and at times you may take a position against legislation based on what you consider the view of being either good or bad for business. And it's one of the things that we're going to talk about and focus about on today's program is business, because it is such an important part of not only New York State but the nation, but especially here in New York State, trying to create a better business climate for businesses to grow and attract businesses in. I know you have some things to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, that is our mission. Our mission is to create a better economic environment so businesses can hire and grow jobs in the state. And so that overall everyone in the state has better opportunities and is more prosperous. So we advocate in Albany, we're lobbyists for the business community, and basically we advocate for issues that will improve the job climate.
Talking about the job climate, one of the pieces of legislation that I'm sponsoring is a revision to the wage theft bill that was passed a couple of years ago. Can we talk about that piece of legislation and what it means to business? What, if this bill is successful in getting this passed, what it would mean to business?
Sure. I mean, this is a great example of where a good legislative idea maybe goes a step too far. And so there was a legislation passed a couple years ago called the Wage Theft Prevention Act. And in part, it requires employees to get notices, which you get in your paycheck every 2 weeks, what your salary is, what your rate of pay is. But additionally, it required every employer once a year to collect a signed statement from every employee and hold it in a file for 7 years, saying what their rate of pay was, essentially. And it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's really an example of sort of overwhelming paperwork requirements that serve no purpose. And so the bill that you sponsored is one that will just alleviate this one requirement so that businesses aren't spending a lot of time trying to collect signatures from employees, which states information that's on their paycheck every 2 weeks. And so it's a great example of getting rid of some unnecessary red tape, and we strongly support the effort. Hopeful that it will pass this session.
Well, I'm very happy to work with Business Council in trying to get this legislation passed. Just in terms of the cost of business, I know, for example, if an employee doesn't return the signed form, it's incumbent upon the employer then to actually kind of go after and chase the employee to get that signature. So there's costs that are involved.
Absolutely.
In this.
And for larger employers, I mean, they had to create a new system. Basically some computer technology investments, but also create a system inside their personnel office to get the piece of paper. I mean, imagine if you had 10,000 or 15,000 employees, how hard it is to get back a piece of paper with their signature on it, every single one, and make sure that you have it. And there are fines if you don't follow through and comply with this. And again, you question the rationale behind the requirement because, as I mentioned already, it's information that the employees already get every 2 weeks. So
it is really redundant in terms of having the employee sign and then the employer have to keep it on file for 6 years.
Right. I mean, we did some preliminary estimates of what the cost was to some of our member companies, and I mean, really hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of implementing new systems so that they would be able to comply with this new requirement. And I mean, for one or two companies, hundreds of thousands of dollars across the state. It's got to be in the millions, and it really, again, it really doesn't serve any purpose that isn't already a requirement, so it's really unnecessary.
Well, hopefully we're going to be able to get that passed and relieve the business community of, number one, of the process of having to do that and the cost. And I think it's just one of those common sense things that really needs to be done, business friendly, just makes sense to do that.
Right.
One of the hotly contested pieces of legislation that was actually adopted last week was the Tier 6 proposal. The governor came out with his original proposal in his budget for Tier 6. There's been an awful lot of debate, both for and against. A version of Tier 6 was passed in the wee hours of the morning last Thursday. Can you talk about Tier 6?
Sure. I mean, I will tell you, as a general principle, my members would like to see the state transition towards a 401k style defined contribution plan. It's something that much of the private sector has already done, including the Business Council itself. We once had a pension and came to the realization that it really is not a sustainable model as a business. And we believe that the same is true at the state level. That being said, the Tier 6 pension reform that was adopted, which does contain a small defined contribution, which is the 401k style plan for certain employees, overall, the improvements in the pension system for new hires doesn't impact anyone who's currently in the pension system. Ultimately will save taxpayers. This is property owners, it's municipalities, it is every person who pays taxes in the state, about $80 billion over 30 years, and that is very significant. That's $80 billion that we won't have to come up with if we were to stay on the same course. So we strongly support it as a step in the right direction. You know, obviously we're hopeful that over time there'll be more of a transition towards the defined contribution, which is sort of the 401k style plan, where the employee has the ability to take it with them if they change jobs.
When you talk about the $80 billion, we're talking about budgetary issues. Where I think we're poised this week to pass a budget. It looks like we will have a budget on time. I actually thought we were going to have a budget earlier than what it appears to be. But can you talk about the budget process? You've been around, you've seen budgets through a number of years. Can you get your insight as far as where we are?
Sure. I mean, I'll tell you, I had the great misfortune of actually being a staffer working on the budget when I was in the Senate for a period of about 8 years, and every single one of those years the budget was late, and so maybe it's because I don't work there anymore that they're actually on time now. But you know, as far as the confidence of the business community in general and the ability to govern, having an on-time budget does send a very strong message. And add to that the fact that this year and last year are both very low growth or no growth budgets. This is a very big change from sort of the past practices of the legislature and the executive over the course of maybe the last 15 or 20 years. And so it's a real positive sign that at the highest levels there's a recognition that we need to get our fiscal house in order so that businesses and taxpayers year after year aren't surprised at what new taxes and fees might be in the budget or what cuts might be in the budget. I mean, I think if we can control the growth, we can manage and be more predictable. And that's really important. People, I think, need to have comfort that you've got a government that is steady. You don't have wild changes in policy from one year to the next. So I think we're feeling very good about it.
I think the governor has done a good job in terms of the budget or the financial situation that he inherited at $13 billion deficit. Did a good job, I think, last year in handling and reducing what was projected to be a $13 billion deficit this year. Got that down to about $3 billion. So for us to handle a $3 billion deficit, that should probably be pretty easy to get done.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly, I think what the governor has done is doing the things that I think the business community and the residents across the state want to see in terms of reducing spending, no new taxes. I think those are key things, and I think kudos to the governor for being able to do that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that it was a very difficult situation that the governor walked into, and the legislature, quite frankly, to have to cope with an economic decline and increased needs at the state level. And so far, it's been really a testament to the governor's leadership and the leadership of the legislature that they have been able to manage the process without a lot of drama in the last 2 years. And I'll say this, I think that it's very important that we recognize that you can't cut your way out of a fiscal crisis and you can't tax your way out of a fiscal crisis. You have to grow your way out of it. And the way to grow your way out of it is to create jobs. From new jobs come new revenues without having to raise the tax rate at all. And so the most important thing is finding an environment where companies are comfortable in hiring, in growing jobs, and it basically will benefit everyone statewide if we can get there.
You just mentioned growing jobs and environment. Mm-hmm. That's the next area I want to get into.
Yeah.
We'll talk about hydrofracking.
Yeah.
It's an issue that has come up, it's been debated for the last few years. Proponents talk about the huge amount of jobs that it can create, what it can add to the economics of the state, and those on the other side of the issue are concerned about environmental issues, water, air, things like traffic, things like that. Your stand on hydrofracking?
We strongly support moving forward with hydrofracking in the state of New York. I'll start off by saying our Public Policy Institute did an analysis last year of what the potential job growth would be just in New York State, just for 1 year, in the neighborhood of 25,000 jobs once it's fully up and running and implemented. We're very comfortable that it can be properly regulated. That's not to say that there aren't bad examples. There are bad examples in everything that human beings do. Flying planes, driving cars, nothing is 100% safe 100% of the time. That being said, we are very comfortable with the state DEC's ability to regulate. I don't think anyone in the business community would accuse them of going easy on the regulated. So we feel very strongly that it's something that we have to look at. It is a step in the right direction in terms of becoming less dependent on fossil fuel and in potentially lowering the cost of the delivery of electricity in the state. We're the second highest state in the nation in terms of electric costs, and having, I think, resident resources to generate electricity would be very beneficial to the taxpayers.
Heather, I think you're right in terms of if we're going to do it, we need to do it right. We have to have the proper regulations in place. Not always easy, as you said. There are going to be examples where something is going to happen, but then being able to respond to it in the proper way, I think, is important. And I think you're right. It has the opportunity to create an awful lot of jobs, an awful lot of wealth. Heather, I want to thank you for being our guest today, and continue the good work that the Business Council does.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you once again, and I want to thank you for joining us on Assembly Update. We will see you again next week.